Hey everyone! So the last video I did was about Flight Rising, and I received a lot of comments about how people were excited that I was talking about Flight Rising again. A couple of videos ago, I mentioned that Flight Rising has a lot of accessibility features that not many other games have, and I kind of want to dive into that and talk about wayfinding. So wayfinding, you might be familiar with this concept, like if you're at a theme park and you're trying to find your way, or if you're at an airport, or if you're at a mall and you're trying to orient yourself in this space and try to logic out, I am at A, I want to get at B, how do I get from A to B? And specifically, when we talk about theme parks, there's all kinds of intentional engineering of the space to direct individuals to markers or places that are more likely to stimulate more activity. So when we look at online spaces, we ask ourselves, what are the goals this website wants me to achieve? And then how do I achieve those goals? On a website like Flight Rising, there are daily activities that are conducive to a positive experience on Flight Rising. I've also seen that people have been commenting that they are new to Flight Rising and that they're experiencing some challenge understanding what to do on the website. And I have a recollection from almost a decade ago now of when I first started Flight Rising, and I could not figure it out for the life of me. So I'm going to do kind of two things at once. I'm going to show a flow of activities, and then I'm also going to highlight the accessibility features that Flight Rising has built in. And these are just the ones that I know about. So if you know about additional ones, please call them out. I tried to locate a page on Flight Rising that kind of like outlines all of their accessibility features, but I couldn't find one. And I feel like if that's something that you've put so much effort into, why don't you have an accessibility guide? So Flight Rising, if you're watching, why not? Consider it. So we're on the webpage right now, the homepage flightrising.com, and just looking at it, it's hard to get a hierarchy of what you're supposed to do, right? Traditionally speaking, when we talk about page layout design, the human eye will do kind of like a Z pattern where you start in the upper left and then move over to the upper right, and then pan from the upper right to the lower left to the lower right. And this is how humans scan pages, and that's useful in this space where the website is specifically laid out kind of like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, right? The aspect ratio is pretty similar to that, and that's to take advantage of like tablets, etc. So everything is kind of centered in this vertical rectangle in the middle of the page where there's kind of dead space on either side. So there's two ways that we can approach a day on Flight Rising. First of all, we've got at the bottom of the screen, it moves with the screen, it's called a Witch Waystone. So it's specifically designed to help you wayfind if you're new to the game. I think this is a pretty okay concept. I personally am not crazy about the way it's laid out. You can toggle the button on and off. I keep it on because it's just a good reminder that it exists, and it's not obtrusive at all. The way that it's formatted, it's always intentionally just out of frame, right? It's never going to overlap content on the page. This lays out all of the activities on Flight Rising that you can do every day. Some of these you can do multiple times a day, and then some of these, they don't really help in any beneficial way. Like, you get like 20 currency out of it. I personally do not follow this Witch Waystone. However, if you're new to the game, this might be a helpful way to get grounding on how to play Flight Rising. Really, I think the biggest opportunity to streamline wayfinding is to renovate this Witch Waystone page. Instead of it being a scroll feature, I think it would benefit if it was a page full of squares and that it was divided by how frequently you could do the activities. And then at the top it would be dailies, and then at the bottom it would be others. So I do agree with the way that they have them delineated. I would just portion them out differently, and instead of having a scroll feature, you just have them all presented as options. The benefit to having it laid out like this is you don't have to scroll to see any information, and scrolling on a website is like my least favorite activity. Like, oh my god. The number one offender of making you scroll is Lioden, right? You go to a den page, and let's say you want to feed your lions. You have to scroll. You have to scroll so far. Oh my god. There's so much scrolling. Like, Lioden is like scrolling simulator. Web page scrolling sim. Alright, let's throw some lions out to hunt. Like, look at this. Look at the amount of scrolling I have to do. I'm sorry, it drives me crazy. Like, Flight Rising is really good at making you not have to scroll. And Lioden is like, what's the problem? It's just a little scrolling. The problem is that it takes a millisecond away from my life. A single millisecond that I have to engage my index finger to scroll on the little mousy guy. A millisecond that I'm never going to get back. Like, functionally, here's an example of the frustration. So I'm going to the territory map, I'm clicking on a random territory, and now I'm scrolling down to see if I can attack this lion. So many times you click on a spot, you scroll down, and you can't even attack them. It's just like, great, I just wasted 2 seconds of my life that I didn't have to waste. Thanks, Lioden. But anyways, to take us back to Flight Rising, I think it's fine to scroll sometimes. You don't have to have huge buttons, like this is a huge button. You could have small buttons and have them in a grid, like 4 across and 3 down, of what the different daily activities are and how frequently you can interact with them. Let's look at some other examples of virtual pet sites that have their own kind of Witch Waystones or wayfinding pages. There's a couple of these, and funnily enough, a lot of them are fan-made Neopet sites. So for instance, we've got Leopets. So the Leopets game room lays out all of the features that are active on the website. The reason why we see these on Neopets fan recreations is because Neopets Vanilla, the original neopets.com website, has so much content on it that recreating it is a very burdensome activity. So when a fan site launches, they need to decide which features they need to focus on first, and then they need to signal to users that these features are available. So on Leopets, they have in the games room a list of all of the dailies, as well as a miniature explanation of what that daily is. Then they have skill games, and then they have luck and chance games. When you scroll down, they also have quests and contests. So this is important because this tells users these are the features available on the game. Let's jump over to another one. This is Modern Neopets, and I like the way they have this one laid out as well. All of these you have to scroll due to the nature of the site design. The way that they have it laid out is they have free dailies segmented up here, so these ones you don't have to spend any currency for. Then they have ones that you could play multiple times a day. Then they have the scratch card kiosks, and then they have the other miscellaneous dailies. I really like the way this is laid out. It's really easy to interpret, and I like the way that they segment the categories. Now let's talk about Marapets. Marapets has their own kind of wayfinding, and this here is the pet dailies page. So it has everything that your pet can do once a day. I've done a lot of these, which is why they're grayed out, and they tell you when you could do them again. Stuff like the Olympics, which also, funnily enough, is timed out. Our university or school or the resort, stuff like that. I like the wayfinding on Marapets because there's so many different ways to engage with so many different aspects of the game, but then there are different tactics to move the player along in their game. For instance, if you click on the shield button, there is a leveling process. This is something I think Flight Rising could do really well. It would be stuff like add 5 slots to your lair, unlock all of the nests, collect this many familiars, and then you level up to the next category. I think that Flight Rising would really benefit from doing something like that, and it would also show users which activities are desirable. So this is just an example of how different websites do their wayfinding technique. I want to start with something that I struggled with at first. So this is also something you'll need to do every day. When you go to your dragon lair, you'll see that their energy bars, they're partially depleted. And that's reflected on the upper right-hand side at the clan energy bar. This means that some of your dragons are hungry and they need to be fed. And we could get all into how to feed dragons. I'm going to show you specifically how to convert food into food points. These are food points up here. And then how to feed your dragons. The first step that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to the gather items page, gathering. When there's a holiday ongoing, you'll have a special banner on the logo and you'll want to gather in the region associated with that holiday. But today there isn't a holiday, so we're going to gather in places that are relevant to my clan for feeding. As we can see, I have over 10,000 food points for every type of food except for seafood. And that's because my dragons overwhelmingly eat seafood. So I'm going to fish for seafood. When you're new to the game, you're gonna probably want to even out where you do your gathering. All of my gathering levels are maxed out, and that is something that I did intentionally over a long period of time. So I'm going to gather some more fish, and then the next one that's important for my lair is hunting, so I'm going to hunt. And then finally, I'm going to get some insects. All right, great. Now this is where I got confused when I first started playing the game. So I just gathered some food. So I would go to the lair, and I would press the feed button, and then nothing would happen because I had 0 food points and I didn't know how to make food points. So here's how you make food points. You go to your horde, and you've got food. Normally, there isn't the search tool. I always enable the search tool because search is my favorite. I love archiving. I love indexing. It's my favorite. I had a career in search engine optimization and marketing for a long time. So I love search indexing. We're going to go ahead and we're going to filter to all the food that's not used in any features. And then this is the important part. We're going to select, and then we're going to press convert to food points. This is how we generate food points, ladies and gentlemen. It says this action is irreversible. Do you wish to continue? Yes. And then it generates food points. All right. And now the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select all seafood, regardless of whether or not it's used in a feature. And I'm going to convert those into food points. And now I'm going to go to my dragon lair, and I'm going to press this feed button, and it feeds all of the dragons. There is a secondary way to feed your dragons, and that is to go on the individual dragon page and click feed this dragon, and it shows you what type of food that dragon eats, and then you click that, and if the dragon was hungry, it would say this dragon's been fed. But this dragon doesn't need to be fed, so it isn't. So that's kind of the thing that I struggled with at first. I did not understand how to do it, and so that I just thought was necessary. So we fed our dragons, we gathered our items. Let's go to the nesting grounds. So this is the nesting grounds. This is one of my favorite parts of flightrising.com. You're going to incubate your nests. You have to incubate them 5 times. I have 5 nests because I've unlocked all of the nests. And then you click hatch. And then we are going to return to the nesting grounds, and we're going to put some dragons to nest. There's no accessibility features here. It's just straight through the same experience for everybody. Now we're going to go to the auction house. Placing auctions is one thing. I am kind of an auction house nut. I have 292 current listings. I prefer to have around 500 listings at any given time, But you're going to say, Julie, that sounds like a lot of work. How do you renew all of those? And I mentioned this in a previous video, but I'm going to mention it again right here. So there are hotkeys to rapidly relist items. So you don't have to click with your mouse on a bunch of things. And so here are the hotkeys. You're going to hold down on enter, plus relist, and then it does it instantly. And that's it. That's the big secret. That's what I do every day. Let's jump over to the dragon lair, and now we're going to bond with familiars. So you can get familiars throughout the website, and then the goal is kind of to awaken them. And then once you awaken them, your bestiary will list them as discovered, regardless of whether or not you own them, because you are able to bond with familiars through Fiona's fantastic familiars, right? And familiars that you don't possess will sometimes generate in here. And then familiars that you do possess will generate in here. And then when you come across them in your dragon lair, they will show as already been bonded with if you bond here first. There are no hotkeys on this page. You have to do everything manually. So the hotkeys in familiar bonding are, you're going to use the arrow keys and the mouse. Is there a way for me to... Okay, here we go. So you click bond, you see this black outline around close. That's how you know that there's a hotkey enabled. So I'm clicking bond, and then I'm clicking the arrow key as soon as the pop-up dialog box generates. And then if I'm like, oh, did I skip that one? Then I go back using the back arrow key. But otherwise, it's the right arrow key. It's really nice that on Flight Rising you could use the arrow keys to navigate around. That's my predominant way of navigating through dragons. There's also the option, if you hover over the image, these little arrows appear, and you can click on those to navigate as well. And the traditional way of doing this just takes several clicks, and it's just kind of tedious in the grand scheme of things. I don't know, there might be a difference of like 30 seconds cumulatively between the two different actions, but for me that's enough. So those are all of the things that I regularly do on Flight Rising. If you see here, I have very few dragons in my den. If you jump over to my Hibernal den, you'll see that I have far more dragons in my Hibernal den than my lair. And what's that about? So Hibernal den is where you could send dragons to hibernate, where you don't need to feed them. They kind of get in a suspended animation while they're there. And that's beneficial because otherwise you're spending crazy food points to keep all of your dragons fed every single day. So I overutilize the Hibernal den. If a dragon in my lair can go to the Hibernal den, I send them. The exclusion are these dragons in the first page. I keep these out all the time. But these dragons, if they can move over, I move them over. Let's see if there's any, like... Bye! I do that every day. Hibernal den slots are unique in the sense that in order to add more Hibernal den slots, which a slot is correlated with an individual dragon, you can't place a dragon there unless there's a slot for them. You have to purchase the slots, and you could either purchase them with gems, which is the paid for currency on Flight Rising, or you can unlock them with items. I believe there's about 200 of these den slot quests, and I dedicated myself to knocking them out. So they just released 5 more. I finished one right before recording. And so let's see what we've got here. Carcass cleaner. So what we have to do is we have to get the familiars, and then when we press this unlock button, it'll spend the familiars on giving us 1 additional den slot. I don't necessarily need the additional den slots. I'm not looking to expand my lair. I just like having this completed. Completionism is everything. So I need a carcass cleaner. And while I'm in the auction house, there's an opportunity to relist some of my auctions. So let's do that first real quick, and I'll explain further the hotkeys and the accessibility features in relisting in the auction house. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but let's get into further depth right now. All right, so when I'm relisting these, you see how there is a black border around the relist now option. That's how we know there's a hotkey. The same with this OK. So I'm holding down on enter, I'm clicking relist, and it's automatically selecting the relist now and the OK buttons. In order to buy this carcass cleaner, I'm going to have to take some gems out of my vault. Let's just get a couple. We're going to buy this. Now we'll go back here, refresh, and we can unlock a den slot. Beautiful. 3 remaining. Look who's decided to join us. Oh, and she's gone, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so back to unlocking den slots. This is just like a little completionist thing that like my brain can't let sit, so I might as well get it on camera. So Abyss Wanderer, and I most likely have these in my vault. I just don't really care to deplete my vault. I'd rather take a familiar out from the auction house than from my vault. But just for the sake of curiosity, let's see in my vault. And what are these guys called again? Eel of the Depths. I only have one of those. Okay, so not going to do that. And I already have one. I only have one of those. So I am going to withdraw just a couple currency. I put like 300 in today, so I feel just fine taking 300 out. Okay, so I'm looking for a familiar called Eel of the Depths. Whoops. And it looks like I could just search and that will get it for me. Let's talk about some of these supplementary dailies. Like, they're not really crucial to your experience on the website, but I mean, it's an additional fun thing that you can do. One of the most recent to be added is Arlo's Ancient Artifacts. So you access this by going to the trading post, then selecting Arlo's Ancient Artifacts. On this page, there are 2 buttons that have notifications in them. Muster Resources and Dig Site Contracts. We're going to click on Muster Resources and it gives you resources. Then you select Dig Site Contracts and you're provided all of the different digging areas. I'm going to go to Deep Sea Dive, click all worked up tiles, share research. Once you have 8 research, you can share. So I share with the guild, and then I always do rugged work. For a while, I kind of drove myself frustrated by trying to deplete as much of the pickaxes and the magnifying glasses, and it's just a losing game, so I decided to not care about it anymore. Isn't that fun? Just turning something off and not caring about it anymore. But what this does is once you've completed one of these little digging sites, you get the item that's associated with it. And I always turn my familiars into goo. So here's another one of them, Baldwin's Bubbling Brew. And at Baldwin's Bubbling Brew, this is a crafting mini game. You can either transmute objects or create new objects from those transmutations. So I always just transmute. I do not create new. And what we're going to do is we're going to toss in some familiars. And we're going to throw in this. So the familiars that I have in my horde are specially selected based off of the fact that I have many duplicates of them in my vault. And you toss that in, and then it creates an item that you can then sell on the auction house. So no hotkeys there. And those are kind of like the dailies and the experience of playing Flight Rising. You're probably going to note that there are some dailies that I'm not going over. For instance, Crims, Pinkertons, and Tomos. I don't really see this as a huge activity that you need to do, Pinkertons. The same with Crims. On Crims, they give you such little currency in exchange for items that I don't really see this as necessary. I infrequently do this. And then Tomo's Trivia Tablet, I straight up don't do this. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just not interested. Yeah, that's how I generally feel about that. The other thing that I'm not mentioning here is the Coliseum. I do not see this as necessary to experience gameplay on Flight Rising. I just don't do it. I guess when I worked at a call center, I would sometimes spend hours of my life playing the Coliseum. When I was trying to acquire familiars for my bestiary, this was something I did a lot, but since I've filled that out, I don't really need this. Don't really do it. And then there's Fairgrounds, which are kind of like Flash games, or the modern equivalent of Flash games. And I also don't do this. I much prefer the games on Marapets to the games on Flight Rising. It doesn't have the benefit to me for me to do it. Like, there's not enough on-site incentive for me to play these games. I'm glad that they've spent the time developing them, but for me, this isn't it. This isn't the goal. If you're new to Flight Rising, I hope this video was helpful, and if you've been playing Flight Rising for a while and didn't know about all of the different ways to navigate around the site, I hope this was also helpful. And if you don't play Flight Rising at all, I hope that you are able to keep up. I know that sometimes I get a little into the weeds about my own brain stuff, and I hope that this was entertaining. Alright, if you guys have any questions or comments, just leave them below, and otherwise I will see you on the next one. Bye!